Welcome to the channel again. As usual, today I have got a new topic of discussion, that's autobiography or self-recorded fiction by John Barthes. In our today's discussion, we shall be talking about the introduction of the text. There will be summary and discussion in English and Nepali. Later there will be discussion, and finally there will be summing up of the text. I am sure all of you will accompany me till the end of this video. If you are new to my channel, please subscribe my channel, and if you think this video is worth watching, please don't forget to share and drop a like. Okay, here we go. Let's get started. Here is introduction. The title is Autobiography. It's a self-recorded fiction. Author John Barthes from USA. The language he wrote this text is in English, and it was published in 1968 AD in Last in the Funhouse collection. That is the collection of stories. The genre here is short story, and subgenre it is called metafiction, and narrative here is direct monologue. The speaker is speaking alone here. Characters: John, the speaker, and dad and the reader. The literary trend that this piece of text belongs is postmodernism, and the story has just 10 words here. In sum, I am not what either parent or I had in mind. This is the narrative framework of this story, and within this narrative framework the author develops a kind of metafictional discourse which is entitled Autobiography or Self-Recorded Fiction. We will get into the text later. Let us have a summary first in English. You gave me birth and words for speech and the misleading name, yet I won't hold you responsible. I don't recall asking to be convinced I am linked with the world. I speak in a curious, detached manner and don't necessarily hear myself. If so, I am blind and deaf to you. And you are me, or both are both. I am a fiction with real hope. Where there is a voice, there is a speaker. I see myself as halt narrative, first person tiresome. Pronoun carries no single voice. I am a little case of identity for you. I am nothing but a talk. I just might live forever, a word to the wise. Mother, who was a mere passing fancy, gave birth to me. My dad found her and assisted with his pointless pain to give me my birth. A child is not its parents, but some of their conjoined sams. Nothing lasts longer than a mood. He understood about time that anything produced in so unnatural and fugitive a fashion was likely to be unusual or abnormal, even monstrous. What fathers can't forgive is that their offspring receive and so broadcast their shortcomings. My dad has also tried to turn me up with at least half a heart. In his heart of hearts, he wonders whether I may not, after all, be the gate of the nobler spirit, taken by beauty past his grasp. I continue the tale of ancestors, thus my exposure, thus my escape. This curse me, turn me out of it, that curse me, curse him, save me. We monstrosities are easier achieved than got rid of. In sum, I am not what either parent or I had in mind. One hoped I would be astonishing, forceful, triumphant, heroical in other words. One dead, I myself conventional. I turn out I am dad's creature, his caricature. Unhappily, I am aware of myself at all. It would be happier if anything dramatic were going to happen to me, successfuler, agreeabler, endurabler, a change for all. The better still isn't unthinkable. Early on, I too aspired to immorality. I also assumed I would be beautiful, powerful, loving, loved. Even the revelation of my special defects didn't fetch me right to despair. I wonder if I repeat myself. Perhaps I'm still in the womb, hung up in my delivery, since Dad, among his other failings, failed to end me with when he should have. I will turn myself up if I can now, but I can't. I pray to end me with a kindness. Anyone didn't. Father, her pity's sake, put an end to this. Maybe the end come quietly. Perhaps I will have a posthumous cautionary value. Yet it is too late now. It will be thrown into basket. It is a waste. I will mutter to the end one word after another. String the rascals out. Mad or not, hard or not, my last words will be my last words. Okay. So this is overall the summary of the text in English. Now let's talk about or discuss about the text in Nepali. आत्मकथा आफै लिपिबद्ध भएको आख्यान जोन बार्थ। आत्मकथा आफै स्वराङ्कित आख्यान अमेरिकी आख्यानकार जोन बार्थको एउटा नयाँ शैलीमा रचित अधिआख्यान हो। मेटाफिक्सनलाई यहाँ अधिआख्यान भनेर उल्था गरिएछ। यसमा मुख्य पात्र म, जो जोन आफै पनि हुन सक्छन्। उनले 10 शब्दमा आफ्नो पहिचान दिएका छन् र तिनै शब्दहरूबाट कथाको स्वरूप निर्माण भएको छ। यहाँ कथावाचकले आफ्नो बाबुलाई सम्बोधन गर्दै भनेका छन्, तिमीले मलाई जन्म दियौ र बोली पनि सिकायौ र मलाई यो भ्रमपूर्ण नाम दियौ, तर पनि म तिमीलाई यसको भागीदार मान्न सक्दिनँ। म गर्भमा बसेको क्षण स्मरण गर्न सक्दिनँ। म संसारसँग जोडिएको छु। म उत्सुक स्वरमा बोल्छु, एक्लै बस्छु र म आफूलाई सुन्न सक्दिनँ। त्यसैले म तिम्रो लागि दृष्टिबिन र बहिरो छु। तिमी म जस्तै छौ वा दुवै जस्ता। म सही आशा बोकेको आख्यान हुँ। जहाँ आवाज छ त्यहाँ वक्ता छ। म आफूलाई रोकिएको आख्यान ठान्दछु। प्रथम पुरुष थकित। सर्वनामले कुनै एक आवाज ल्याउँदैन। म केही होइन, बरु कुरा हुँ। म सदाको लागि बाँच्न सक्छु होला सायद। बुद्धिमानीको लागि एक शब्द। आमा विवेकी रुमानी नारी थिइन्, जसले मलाई जन्म दिइन्। मेरो बाबुले उनलाई भेटेर मलाई जन्म दिन टुप्पो नभएको कलमले सहयोग गरे। सायद यो बाबुआमाको एउटा शारीरिक सम्बन्धको कुरा गरे हुनुपर्छ। यहाँ बाबुको त्यो योगदान, त्यो टुप्पो नभएको कलमलाई चाहिँ एउटा त्यसबाट चाहिँ उनले जुन वीर्यदान गरे, त्यही वीर्यदानबाट जन्मेको बच्चा, उनको योगदान त्यसरी चाहिँ उसले मूल्याङ्कन गरेका छ। बच्चा उसको बाबुआमा होइन, बरु ती दुवैजना मिलेको लाजमर्दो अवस्थाको परिणाम हो। भाव जति लामो कुनै चिज पनि टिक्दैन। उसले समयको महत्त्व बुझेर अनौठो तरिकाले उत्पत्ति भएको कुनै पनि चिज पहिरन जस्तै मौसमी हुन्छ। मेरो बाबुले मलाई त्यति बेला सिद्ध्याउन खोजेका थिए, तर सकेनछन् र म आज तपाईहरु समक्ष विगत कोट्याउँदैछु। कुनै श्रापले म बाँच्न पुगेँ, कुन्नी मलाई थाहै भएन। हामी राक्षसीहरूलाई पाउन जति सहिलो हुन्छ गुमाउनलाई भने हुँदैन। मतलब हामी जति प्राप्य हुन्छौँ त्यति गम्य हुँदैनौँ। हामीलाई चाहिँ हटाउन सकिँदैन। म त्यो होइन जो मेरा बाबुआमा मध्ये एक वा मैले दिमागमा भएको कुरा थियो। उनले बाबुआमाले मलाई अचम्मको बोलियो बहादुर नायक जस्तो होस् भन्ने ठाने। अर्काले मरेको भए पनि उनी ठाने। आमाले चाहिँ त्यसो ठाने, बाबुले मरे भए पनि उनी ठाने। म आफै परम्परावादी। म देखा परेँ। म बाबुको बच्चो, उनको व्यङ्ग्य चित्र, बाबुको अनुहार जस्तो भएको, बाबुको शरीर आकृति भएको, तर अलि व्यङ्ग्यात्मक पाराको, केही बाबुको विशेषता भएको, तर चाहिँ अनौठो पाराको, देख्दाखेरि पनि एउटा हाँसो उठ्ने खालको। दुःखपूर्ण रूपमा भनौँ, म आफैप्रति जानकार छैन। मेरो बारेमा सबै जानकारी मलाई छँदै छैन। यदि कुनै चिज नाटकीय रूपमा घटेर म अझ सफल बन्ने आयो भने, सहमत बन्ने, सहनशील भएको जस्तो भए म अझ खुसी हुने थिएँ। अझ राम्रो कामको लागि परिवर्तन अझै असोचनीय होइन। अझै म अनैतिकताको लागि पनि चाहना राख्दो भएँ। म अझै मान्दछु म सुन्दर, शक्तिवान, प्रिय भएको ठान्दछु। मेरा धेरै कमजोरीहरूको पर्दाफासले पनि मलाई निराश हुने अवस्था सिर्जना गरेनन्। म मलाई लाग्छ म आफूलाई दोहोऱ्याउन सक्छु। सायद म अझै आमाको पेटमा जन्मने दिन कुरेर झुन्डी बसेको छु, किनकि मेरो बाबुले अरू असफलता जस्तै मलाई सिद्ध्याउन सकेनछन्। म आफै आत्महत्या गरी यो मानव चोलाबाट सदाको लागि बिदा लिन पनि सक्छु, तर म त्यो गर्न सक्दिनँ। मारिदेऊ भनेर प्रार्थना गर्छु, कसैले पनि त्यस्तो मार्ने हिम्मतै गरेन। बाबुले आफ्नो स्वार्थका लागि मलाई सिद्ध्याएनन्। सायद अन्त बिस्तारै आउँदैछ। सायद मेरो मृत्यु पश्चात मेरो सावधानी मूल्य बढी छ होला। यसलाई टोकरीमा फालिदिने काम होला। यद्यपि अब धेरै ढिला भइसक्यो। यो दिशा हो, यो फोहोर चिज हो। अन्तसम्म म बरबराउँछु, एक्लै कराउँछु। मेरा अन्तिम शब्द नै मेरा अन्तिम शब्द हुनेछन्। यो कथा यसरी नै टुङ्गिएको छ। यो कथा राम्ररी अध्ययन गर्दै जाँदा एउटा अधिकथाको वर्गीकरण अन्तर्गत पर्ने कथा हो। यहाँ पारम्परिक आख्यानमा जस्तो कथावस्तु, पात्र, देशकाल, परिवेश नहुन पनि सक्छन्। कुनै घटना कहीँ घट्दैनन्। लेखकले पाठकलाई आफूले आफैलाई बुझेको कुराको बारेमा विश्वास दिलाउने प्रयास गर्दैछ। यहाँ कथाकारले स्वयं कथा वाचन गरिएको छ, तर उसले आफूलाई कथाबाट अलग राख्न चाहेको छैन। उसका मनोभावहरू उसको कथा कथनमा प्रकट भएका देखिन्छन्। प्रत्येक अनुच्छेदमा उसले व्यक्ति, सुर, ताल, लवज मिलाउन खोजेको देखिन्छ। कतिपय ठाउँमा कथावाचक आफैसँग बोलिरहेको देखिन्छ। यसरी यस अधिकथामा हामीले परम्परागत र आख्यानको विधि, परिवेश र शैलीभन्दा फरक शैलीको आख्यानका स्वाद चाख्न पाएका छौँ। उत्तराधुनिक कालमा विकसित भएको यो आख्यान शैली आख्यानमा अधिआख्यान भनेर चिनिन्छ। मेटाफिक्सन, फिक्सनको पनि मेटाफिक्सन। आख्यानको बारेमा आजसम्म बेग्लै चर्चा हुने यो पद्धति अहिले लेखकहरूबीच चर्चाको विषय बनेको छ। लरेन्स स्टर्नको ट्रिस्टम स्यान्डी, जोन फाउल्सको फ्रेन्च लेफ्टिनेन्ट वुमन जस्ता यस आदि आख्यानका अन्य उदाहरणहरू पनि छन्। अब हामीले यो सिमुलाक्रा एउटा अर्को चाहिँ अधिआख्यानको उदाहरण पनि हो। यस्ता कथाबाट चाहिँ यस्ता कथाको शैली, त्यहाँ कथाभित्र कथा कसरी लेख्ने, त्यहाँभित्रको विषयवस्तु जुन कथा लेखिरहेछ त्यो कथा नै कसरी लेखेँ भनेर चाहिँ लेखकले त्यही बारेमा चर्चा गरिरहेको हुन्छ। एउटा त्यो फरक शैली हो, लेखकीय शैली, त्यो फरक शैली हो। त्यसलाई अधिआख्यान भनेर अहिलेको चाहिँ एउटा आख्यानको विवेचना गर्ने क्षेत्रमा त्यसरी आएको हुनाले हामीलाई यो अटोबायोग्राफी अर सेल्फ रिकर्डेड फिक्सन जुन जोन बार्थको अधिआख्यान, हामीले यसलाई चाहिँ जुन रूपमा हेरिरहेछौँ, यसले कथाको विश्लेषणमा नयाँ आयाम थपेको हामीले महसुस गरेका छौँ। ओके, लेट्स गेट गोइङ विथ commentary and analysis. This story falls in a metafictional discourse of writing. The story moves with some details which aren't merely events of the story. Neither do the details contribute to the movements of the story in a chronological details. The events are not fictional, but they are metafictional, where the author deceives the reader with some details of experiences from the life. Also, he speaks something to his readers that they may completely understand where he deceives them. The story begins with some sketchy details, but the details don't lead a chain of events. The speaker speaks mostly as poets does. The speaker speaks as if he is addressing to somebody. He is supposed to have told the story to the listener who is imaginative, here as a reader. He is mere speaker, but he isn't teller of good events. My beginning was comparatively interesting. Believe it or not, exposition I was spawned not long since in American state. Even though narrator tells his accounts, but he doesn't detach himself from involvement in the story. He addresses his readers as if he is speaking in front of large mass. His emotional attitudes are reflected in the way of storytelling. Moreover, he moves ahead with fluctuating ideas from one point to another. The reader doesn't find the swift flow of story. In all paragraphs, his subjective tone and the process of deception is apparent. In each paragraph, the speaker brings out new idea that doesn't coincide with what he said in the beginning. Neither does a reader find any help to understand what he likely tells further. The plot of the story isn't fixed in terms of its movement, projecting certain details or events. We can say that this story is a plotless. All the times, readers are aware of personal tone, feelings, and subjective attitude of the speaker. He never stops to talk one thing at a time, but brings light to his family and some other things. Though it is plotless, the movement of the story concentrates on writer's personal life. The readers only get hints through the details he addresses to them. In some place, the author engages in conversation with himself. Readers get changing scenes and context as there in no football match is there in football match, but the changing context and scene don't attribute to any external moment. To speak about character, in the story is without character in rigid fictional sense. The readers aren't identified with his ways of actions. In the story, there is merely narrator who can't be tackled as character, though something is told about, but this doesn't bear that he is identified in certain action. The character doesn't appear in action and reaction. In rigid sense, readers can't find him as character since there lacks passage and details to describe him. Though there are some attitudes and mental temperaments, but they aren't complete in terms of characterization. Neither do we find any external details talking about him. Likewise, there aren't scenes and settings in the story. No events happen anywhere. All the details are subjective expression which can't suit to any time or event. The author makes the reader believe what he understands about himself. The symbols and metaphors are unpertinent in the story. A reader doesn't come across certain implied meanings through imageries and symbols. For understanding implied meaning, the reader must understand stated meaning. If there isn't stated meaning possible through events and situations, a reader can't explore implied meaning in the story. However, the reader finds where the author comes to talk about himself, his personal explorations and thoughts. John Barthes has a frame tale. The story contains a grand total of 10 words. The writer nearly always has his words and sentences reflect back on themselves. Autobiography or self-recorded fiction is an unconventional undertaking by John Barthes. The story challenges this attitude as it employs several means of communication and covertly refers to the relationship between written language and another modes of media. In doing so, the text also draws attention to problems of definition concerning the terms intermediality, medium, and mode. The text at hand is an interesting story from an intermedial as well as multimodal point of view because it employs and refers to different media, questioning conventional notions about different written narratives. Autobiography is one of the most thoroughgoing self-reflexive fiction. In Lust in the Funhouse, that's the name of the collection of the stories in which this story also belongs. For it doesn't pretend a conventional as conventional fictions do that the voice that speaks the fiction is the voice of a human being. Rather, it confronts directly the inescapable fact that what speaks to us is the story itself. Thus, the only autobiography a story can present is a story of its own coming into being and its own mode of existence. Once we accept this fact, the rest of this story follows logically. Every statement in the story is assertion in one way or another about this particular fiction, fictionality, whose mother was a mere fictional device or self-reflexivity, which the father or author was attracted to one day. Some of the key characteristics of fictional fiction in general that the story foregrounds are: fictions have no life unless they are read. Fictions cannot know themselves. Fictions have no body. Fictions have on track mind. Fictions can neither start themselves nor stop themselves. Fictions reflect their authors in distorted ways. Barthes insists that the prosaic in fiction is only where to be transformed into fabulation. For Barthes, the artist's ostensible subject is not the main point, rather it is only an excuse or raw material for focusing on the nature of the fiction making process. Great literature, says Barthes, is almost always, regardless of what it seems to be about itself. Perhaps more than any other American writer in the last quarter of the 20th century, John Barthes made fiction intensely conscious of itself, aware of its traditions and of the conventions that make it possible. If, as the main current of modern thought suggests, reality itself is the result of fiction making processes, then John Barthes is truly a writer concerned with the essential nature of what is real. Autobiography or self-recorded fiction is one of the shortest stories in the John Barthes short story collection entitled Lost in the Funhouse. The metaphysics of Barthes' metafiction in his autobiography, self-recorded fiction, can be studied under 9 points. In the very first line, the narrator gives you, the reader, credit for bringing the story of his life to life by reading his story. However, if it turns out to be a bad life, he will not hold you responsible. Number 2, the narrator, let's give him a name, John. This is fiction, not to be confused with the actual author John Barthes. Let's the truth be known. He didn't ask to be born, neither did his parents ask him ask that he be their child. At least you have to give John credit for his honesty. Number 3, John wonders if we are following his train of thought as he pens his autobiography, since in the world of postmodern metafiction, the process of writing and how the words, the writing and the process make their impression on the readers in an ongoing concern. Number 4, we read, look, I am writing. No, listen, I am nothing but talk. I won't last long. Again, we can award John points for honesty, since he is telling the truth. His autobiography is less than 6 pages in length, but he claims there is truth. Again, from my conception to the present moment, Dad's tried to turn me up, nor ardently, nor consistently, not successfully so far, but persistently. Persistently, with at least half a heart. How do I know I am his bloody mirror? Caricature here. And again, not every kid thrown to the wolves ends a hero. For each survivor, a mountain of beast beds. For every Oedipus, a city of Thebes. Come on, John, is that a witty play? And words are good reasons to make us groan. Number 7, John admits he doesn't have a clue about his life or anything he is talking about. If this is indeed the case, good thing is autobiography doesn't stretch past several pages and will take us less than 10 minutes to read. The frame tale of his fiction has altogether 10 words. There is not period at the end of John's last sentence, implying a kind of to be continued. After all, his life is not over yet. Number 9, John Barthes' metafictional slice of life is short. It has broken the trend of writing autobiography. Metafiction is fictional writing which self-consciously and systematically draws attention to its status as an artifact in order to pose questions about the relationship between fiction and reality. Metafiction is a fiction on fiction. Although autobiography shares some common points with or generic autobiographies, metafiction and self-begetting fiction, still it cannot be called a mere self-begetting one developing out of the story's self-awareness. Although the narrator in this story attempts to finish up his narrative, neither the reader nor he does that for him. Finally, it is still on the volition of the author that the story begins and finishes. Autobiography is a monologue uttered by the storyteller itself. Since the author personifies the story, thus from now onward, the pronoun he is used to refer to the story. The story is woven out of the narrator I, or the I narrator's self scrutiny, which stands for metafictional self awareness. Following the norms of autobiography, the text is marked with flashbacks. These parts of the text in which the author remembers a memory about himself, his focus is diegetic, whereas the parts in which he recalls his mother or father, his focus becomes hero-diegetic. The monologuer's narrative is a hybrid of hetero and homodiegetic focalization. The narrator shows mental inconsistencies. This fluctuation of localization implies the narrator's paranoia. The story's beginning statement emphasizes the verbality of either identity, listener, speaker, writer, reader. This reminds one of Barthes' view of the texture of reality and identity. In this respect, Barthes calls the narrator of paper, being for Barthes literature and language no longer hold their communicational and informative roles. As Barthes contends, these facts of language were not perceptible so long as literature pretended to be a transparent expression of either an objective calendar or psychological subjectivity, as long as literature maintained a totalitarian ideology of the referent, or more commonly speaking, as long as literature was realistic. John Barth wrote metafictional short story entitled Autobiography, a self-recorded fiction. It is a monologue uttered by the story itself. Since the author personified the story thus, from now onward the person he is used to refer to the story. The direct monologue of the story is the story of his life, which dialogues directly with his father, the writer, and the reader. Unlike conventional autobiographies, which narrate the developmental or procedural course of narration, that is self-consciousness, Barthes' story concentrates on and deconstructs such dichotomies as narrator story and writer reader. The story is woven out of the I narrator self scrutiny, which stands for metafictional self awareness. Okay, we have come to the part that we try to sum up what we have discussed throughout this discussion. In this particular short story, Autobiography or self-recorded fiction, Barth uses a metafictional voice to tell the story. The story has only one character who tells their own story in a prose form. As the title of the story suggests, the speaker is a prose fiction recording their own speaking voice. Barth based the story on his belief that where there is a voice, there is a speaker. The fictional story is about an unnamed child who feels lost due to their lack of identity. The father of the child keeps referring to the child as an unwanted child. Barth uses the phrase unwanted child figuratively. He has also made use of puns in the story to explain how the parents of the character look more like the novel itself rather than the novel devices. The mother of the character refuses to name the child since it was born at the same time that the child's father was taken to hospital for the mentally ill. The lack of identity pushes the speaker to a point where he too sounds mad. He is not in control of the situation. He therefore flirts with his father using a maniacal voice to end it for him. And here is John Barth. With this, I have come to the end of my discussion. I am sure you got the points. If you have any queries, you can put your ideas in my comment box. I will be back with other educational videos for you. Till then, have a nice time.